Good afternoon and welcome to today's Hospice News webinar, Tools and Technology to Address Staff Shortages and Nurse Burnout, sponsored by CareXM. My name is Jim Parker. I'm editor of Hospice News. And before we get into our program, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. First, phone lines have been muted for sound quality. Following the presentation will be a question and answer session. If you have questions, please feel free to write them in the designated box in the GoToWebinar app. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded and will be sent via email afterwards along with the slides. I'm pleased to welcome our speakers today. We have Lori Nelson. From a very young age, Lori was drawn to taking care of the sick and wounded and dreamed of becoming a pediatrician. As time went on, her dreams led to a more balanced career choice in nursing. Lori received her BSN from Wichita State University in 2001. Her first job out of nursing school was in a hospital intensive care unit. After 2 years of helping patients survive in the ICU, she made a dramatic career shift to hospice, where she found her love of supporting and empowering those who were taking their final journey out of this life. Today, Lori is the clinical solutions specialist at CareXM, where she's worked for 12 years helping providers integrate new technologies into their patient care processes, which improve both the patient and caregiver experience. Also with us is Laura Dyer. As a pre-med student at UCLA, Laura studied physiology and planned to attend medical school to pursue her passion for creating outstanding patient experiences. In the final year, however, she decided to change course after identifying the role where she could have the greatest impact on the patient experience, not as a physician, but as a nurse. After graduating from UCLA, Laura continued her education at Johns Hopkins University School of Nursing in an accelerated BSN-MSN program. Prior to her current role as Director of Product Management at CareXM, she worked as a home health and hospice nurse for 10 years. Lori and Laura, thank you both very much for being here today. Our sponsor, CareXM, offers a turnkey solution that automatically connects patients directly to a nurse who has the background information they need to help the patient, as well as progressive virtual care tools your team needs to care for patients in this ever-changing world. The company partners with more than 4,500 providers and reports more than 7 million annual patient interactions. So without further delay, I'll hand this over to our speakers. Lori, would you like to take it away?
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you to everybody who has logged in to join. We are excited to spend some time with you today. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for hopping on the call today. Today's objectives, and we would love to address how staffing and technology changes can help reduce burnout for nurses and address staffing shortages, improves CAP scores and patient outcomes, discover business insights that improve patient care and operational efficiency, as well as reduce ER visits and 911 calls while maximizing those reimbursements that are so precious. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. So I think we can all relate to this image right here when we talk about the unprecedented healthcare staffing challenges that have been compounded by COVID. Staffing shortages, nursing shortages, the buzzword of the last, I feel like my tenure, almost 21 career years have been around since I graduated, but I think we have absolutely recognized that the challenges that we're dealing with in our corner of the healthcare universe today are different than what we have experienced in the past. So staffing is a problem throughout the United States, but especially, in our niche of the world as well. The last 2 years have been challenging, and we know that because of the challenges that we have faced, it has led to care fatigue, clinicians just leaving the entire healthcare space, and something that we've just never experienced before. With that being said, I don't want to focus on the pandemic or the virus because I feel like this image defines what, as leaders, you've probably been experiencing. due to COVID, much of our strategic focus and energy has been spent on navigating how to handle the strenuous day-to-day that we've experienced with this virus. So our singular focus has been distracted away from our, as business leaders, from our goals, the progress that we've wanted to make, the elevating our business solutions, caring for our patients. It's really been a day-to-day lead of survival. So we've gone from goals, dreams of improvement, progress to survival instinct. And this singular focus has really taken us away from some of those other items we love to focus on. So as we talk about nurses being overwhelmed, we're going to really highlight here what you all understand. So nurses overwhelmed, healthcare staffing overwhelmed impacts direct patient care, right? It impacts the nurse's safety and well-being, as well as the patient and safety and well-being. So when we talk about some of the shifts in the macro trends of what we're experiencing in the healthcare space, I know many of the data points won't seem new to you. However, we would love to take the approach of helping you refocus the strategic focus of how you can really impact your staffing, your nurses, your patient care. So being overwhelmed isn't new. ERs have been overwhelmed for years. Nurse to patient ratios have always been a conversation. Staffing shortages ebb and flow. It could be dependent upon your geography, time of year, etc. But those essential staff members are really stretched thin. So let's kind of talk about how we can provide more capacity to them and still impact their overall work-life balance as well as patient care. So we're going to just talk about some macro trends, facts that I'm sure many of you are aware of. Folks want to age in place. This is not new. The trending upward of how many people want to do that in just 3, almost 4 years, it's gone from 3 out of 4 adults to 90% of Americans age 50 and older want to age in place. And depending on your age, I know for me, that includes parental figures in my life, they want to age in place. And another fact or trend that we're noticing is that their children of these 50 plus members aren't necessarily wanting to stick to where they grew up. They don't necessarily want to stick by their parents, loved ones, geographic wise. They can work anywhere now. They're traveling. There's no tie to homes, right? So these are some macro trends we're experiencing in our space. So how do we really navigate that? Just another trend here. A surge of 65 plus adults straining our healthcare system. So that is a 73% increase in the last decade. So when you kind of compound that with looking forward another decade or so, what does that look like? So if we add who's going to care for those individuals, because I also mentioned, as children, we're finding our niche where we want to live, and so we're willing to support those loved ones wherever they're at, but maybe not being the hands-on care that they maybe originally envisioned. So the nursing shortage is projected in the next decade to get worse, as well as baby boomers age, demand increases, supply continues to wane. So we show that 1.2 million nurses needed in addition to what we already have right now in the next 8 years. And this doesn't account for retirees, career changes, the great career shift that we've experienced in the last little bit as well. So how does that affect you as a business leader? So the high nursing turnover rate is evidence of just how tough demands of these important jobs are. So unless we find some solutions, we're going to keep running this wheel, this a hamster wheel. So the trend will continue, but for every 1% change in registered nurse turnover, the cost and or savings can be up to $270,000 per year. Now, some of you may think, oh, I'm not that big, I'm not that small, but the reality is regardless of your size, your nursing wages are about the same. It just is dependent upon what shift you do. Just to hire and train a new staff member, the time that it takes, you're talking anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 of a budget for just one individual. So kind of relate that to that percentage shift a little bit. So when we talk about the people who make our our day-to-days go, even with all the shortages and stress, you have a solid handful of employees who are your core, right? They are the dedicated team members that make your job easier. They make your job worthwhile at times, and they really help your business run smoothly. So how can we protect this group? Knowing that even the most dedicated need a break, a boundary, have a limit to what they can handle. How do we really protect this group? As a hospice nurse, I know through my bio it kind of mentioned my path here, but as a hospice nurse, when I switched into hospice, I was the on-call nurse, and then I did case management, some administration, and I always felt it was my calling as I got into this space to really help people be empowered to care for their loved one at the end of life. There are times it was challenging, though. The biggest challenge was really finding balance in that personal life and professional life to drive the care of my patients, but still focusing on, raising a family, having my own health, my own space. So and when I scheduled time off, there were a lot of times you couldn't always just get all the way off, right? So I want to check on your patients, get an update on what was going, even if you didn't jump in to help solve the problem. And you were always available for coworkers because you were in this together. You were dedicated, you were a team, and you felt guilty if something major happened when you were off, right? But the guilt, the anxiety, the stress, you love your patients and you want to know they're taken care of, but you got to step back and take time for yourself. Take time for your family, take time for your health. So how do we really protect some of these dedicated individuals? Well, these challenges are not new to us at CareXM. We have been helping our clients address the costly staffing challenges for many years, and our story actually starts with an interesting perspective of one of our own. It enabled our team to address some industry challenges in a unique way. So I'd love to share one patient's experience in the healthcare space that helped to drive some of our business decisions. So one of our founders of the company had his own unique experience becoming a home health patient. He was diagnosed with a form of cancer and needed to receive chemotherapy at home. So this experience shifted the trajectory of the course of our company. There was one day he was at home receiving that therapy, and his home health nurse arrived to disconnect his infusion line from his port at the end of the infusion. And I'm sure you can visualize this. The nurse was all gloved up and ready to begin the procedure and hooking the port, that really clean procedure, and her phone rang. You could see the tug in her eyes where she was deciding, do I focus on the patient in front of me? Do I grab this phone call? How do I continue? And guess what she did? She grabbed the patient call because you could tell the guilt was there, like, oh, if I don't grab the call now, I'm gonna have to fix the problem later, right? So she grabbed the call so she could address the caller's need. And once again, she got the call done, got all gloved up and clean again. Same thing happened. She's ready to continue the procedure and the phone rang. Tug in her eyes again. Yes, she answered it. So as our founder sat there, he thought about our team of nurses that are supporting home health and hospice companies like your own, and we're some of the ones interrupting those visit nurses. So, you've got your answering service, clinical triage service. We're the ones interrupting the nurses' patient calls while they're out and about trying to give that really great direct patient care. So it was from this experience, the foundation of our mobile app and our technology began to develop as his thoughts kept coming back to, there's got to be a better way to deliver excellent patient care and support staff. So I'm going to turn the time over to Laura. She is our product member, our tech nurse nerd, and she's going to kind of talk about how we shifted.
Thanks, Laurie. So one thing that I'll mention that I'm sure everybody is familiar with, that if we want to make improvements, if we want to see change happen, that means sometimes we have to move out of our comfort zone and start doing things a different way, or at least be open to the idea, the possibility of doing things differently. And in the world today with technology, there's just this constant need for change and innovation, and things are happening so rapidly. Tools are being developed and just changing overnight. And we took this and looked back at these experiences that we had been in our own ways, and as triage nurses, as well as some of the patient experiences and leaders' experiences, tried to figure out, okay, how can we really identify the right problem and then figure out a solution that would solve that problem. Some of the tools that we saw out there, They might have solved some of it, but weren't really addressing what we felt like we needed to change. And so we looked at potentially a new tool, bringing a new mobile app into the market space and sharing that with our customers in a way that could help support them and their patients. We looked at this tool as an opportunity to expand our way of supporting our clinicians that we were talking to on a regular basis. And it was really born out of this really small need. I'll give you a little bit of a background story. We, as triage nurses, we were constantly, needing to reach out to visit nurses in the field, and we had PDF files or faxed documents of the calendar that would tell us who was on call for that day. And as I'm sure you all can relate, those calendars, those static documents, change often. And so we'd get a frantic call or a last minute email saying, hey, so-and-so isn't working tonight. This is the nurse that's working, so can you make sure to call this person? And along the way, somebody would write a note somewhere and it would get overlooked. And so we'd be calling the wrong nurse at 2 a.m. Nobody appreciated that. We didn't, because it would delay the patient care. The nurse who got woken up in the middle of the night was not happy. And then the nurse who we ended up calling was then frustrated because the patient that they were now about to see potentially had waited more time because we were out chasing down the right nurse to escalate to. So we thought through this, like, how can we get this information in real time? And we came up with this interesting concept of, well, hey, most people these days, they have either a tablet or a smartphone with them at all times. Could we develop a mobile app that would allow them to log in and simply say, hey, I'm the one that's on call, I'm the primary nurse, and that would then tell us in real time who it is that we're supposed to call. No need to manage these calendars and keep track of them and make sure that they're sent in every month, and that the emails, that we're reviewing emails, last minute changes, all of that would potentially just go out the window because we could rely on this one source of truth. Whoever's logged in is the primary nurse on call that we would need to contact. That little spark of an idea then took on another meaning when we thought about that other side of the problem. While our team needed to reach out to that nurse to escalate the patient need, could we incorporate the nurse's availability into the solution so that not only would we know that the nurse was the primary nurse on, but that the nurse was also actually available? It seemed like such a simple solution. We'd ask the nurses to log in at the beginning of their shift and then communicate important status changes during their shift so that we would know, hey, this is the person to contact, but also that they were available for us to call. So when the hospice nurse was in a patient's home, the patient was actively dying and they wanted to focus their time and attention on that delicate situation with the patient's family, our team would know not to disturb them and escalate them to another available resource. That allowed the nurse in the patient's home to feel that reassurance that the patient's needs, the other patient's needs, weren't going unchecked and unnoticed, that someone else was there to help support them, get the calls for other patients to the right people that could handle it in that moment in time. And they then could focus on the patient and the family there in that moment. And that subsequently turned into better patient experience, both for the patients calling in as well as for the patient there and the family there in that moment in time. That then led to even more innovation and development, and that has been a lot of fun for me to really see how we can stretch technology to help support the evolving needs of the healthcare space. We've looked at a lot of different ways to actually get calls to these nurses directly if they're available. Instead of sending it to a third-party triage team, if the nurse is available, can we send the call to that nurse and have the nurse directly support the patient calls? That continued innovation and develop has really allowed us to grow and evolve our support of our providers' evolving needs. And this chart that you can see here, the beginning of COVID, now 2 years ago, 2 years ago, wow, my years are all blending together, we had some of our clients that were using our mobile app to route calls to their team members. It was being adopted, but maybe not as widely as maybe they thought they could. They thought that where they were at was working well enough. They didn't really need to take full advantage of the features and functionality that we were providing. What we learned, excuse me, what we learned in 2020 when COVID really made its appearance was not only how adaptable our technology was, but more importantly, how adaptable people can be. We helped educate and teach these different customers that we were working with, a lot of home health and hospice providers, that telephony, that call routing, all of these potentially foreign terms and kind of scary terms weren't as scary as maybe they might be thinking. And that really, if they could see how it could benefit themselves and their patients, that it would really turn out to be a better overall experience for everyone involved. So we helped implement some of these basic changes with our applications that we had been using for years, and we're able to transition a lot of our customers to working remotely. So this line you can see as we started to see more and more people working from home as the pandemic really started to shut down businesses, including healthcare. We had more people adopt our technology where they could be taking calls from patients and making calls out to patients through our mobile app, and they could work from home and feel connected, that those calls weren't going unanswered and that there was still that connection and that they were supporting their patients effectively. These calls historically would have been handled on like old office phone systems, and someone might have had to go into the office to forward phones, and it would have been to a specific phone number. And we gave our clients and their nurses a way to, at any point in time, they could log into the app and say, hey, I'm the nurse that's available right now, and I'm the one that can take calls. So no need to fiddle with the phone system and program in where the phone calls need to go. Simply log into the app, say I'm available, and the call would go where it needed to go, and the patients would be connected to the person that they wanted to talk with. What's even more significant, if you look at this chart, is that the increasing call volume was really taken on by our clients. We didn't really have to take those calls on ourselves as triage team. Our clients really adapted and were able to grow and change and evolve with the technology and learn how to support their patients and caregivers effectively with that new tool. The system performed just like it was designed to. It really helped them stay connected, and not just to the patients and caregivers, but to each other. They had ways to see each other on the app and feel supported, like I could be at a patient's home caring for a patient, and I could look on the app and see that there were 5 other nurses that were logged in, ready to take calls from another patient if another call were to come in. So I didn't feel like I was the only one on my island when we felt so isolated, being disconnected from the rest of the world. All right, you want to switch to the next slide? Thanks. So one of our larger clients actually came to us early on, and they had a really interesting question. They were hoping that we could help solve a problem for them. They needed to figure out a way to take their workflow from an office setting, providing that excellent care for their patients and family members, and figure out how to transition it to a remote environment without disrupting that experience that they were known for in the community, providing a really quality patient care experience. They wanted to figure out how they could solve for that while working from home. And we weren't really confident at that point in time, how can we solve for this? Our app was really designed more for the call routing. But we actually, working with that customer, were able to figure out a way to essentially turn on the application that we had been using for our own triage team, and we then extended it to their team so that they could use not only the phone calls that they were taking through our mobile app, but document and coordinate care through our technology, just as our triage team was doing on a computer each day. So they could document the call, and that would then allow all of their other team members to see which patient they were actively working on in real time. They could see what work was being done, what follow-up had been done. That continuity of care was so critical because no one wanted to take a call from a patient and not know who they had just talked to and what they had just talked about and what questions had already been answered. That's what we see all the time, especially with customers that are really trying to understand and work into that mindset of taking calls directly from patients and caregivers is what are they going to call about? What are they going to ask me for? I want to be fully prepared. I want to be able to answer all of their questions and know exactly what they need to have, and I want to have that for them. And working remotely was this unknown of how do I usually go to that office space, that office desk over there. That's usually where all this information is. Now I don't have that. How do I feel connected without being in the office? And our tool, we were able to turn on and really allow them to deliver that care and feel connected and know what was going on, and they never really missed a beat. And that really led to this positive experience overall where they felt like they were able to continue delivering that care and feel safe in their own space without ever sacrificing the patient care experience.
Thanks, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
So right now you may be reflecting on your team's needs. Maybe you're thinking about what work issues keep you up at night. How can this help my team, my services I provide to patients, my services I provide to my staff, my budget, my business goals, etc. And so we've given you a couple stories to give you some food for thought and help you start thinking about how maybe some doing things just a little bit different can change maybe some of those stressors you have. When we're in a crisis, a lot of times we get to see the gaps, right? And I feel like this opportunity, we're going to call it that, over the last 2 years of a crisis has given us more visibility maybe into some issues or gaps that we have always talked about, but now we're living them. And maybe they're exposing some of our weaknesses. So how do we navigate some of those things that we've identified? So we partner with many people who are fighting this battle on a daily basis and looking to do something just a little bit different. You know, we're shifting our mindset a little bit. How do we allow them to address and manage burnout, staffing changes, patient care, patient experience? And sometimes it just takes seeing something done differently to manage the same old issue that we've been dealing with for years. So when we do a little different, you can report that you see and feel a difference. And if we think back to the story that I shared about our founder's experience, when his nurse had to decide which patient to care for, he decided he wanted to figure out how to do things just a little bit different. Similar situation across the country, tons of patients having chemo, receiving infusions, having an on-call nurse make a visit, but how can we make it better? How can we have a better patient and caregiver experience? So begin with the end in mind when you ask the question, how can this be done a different way to get a better experience? I'm going to share with you one more story about another client we had who was experiencing staff burnout. They came on as a partner probably about 4 or 5 years ago, but they were having some staff burnout at a very costly price. So I kind of gave you a number of a 1% shift, right, and how much that cost. So they felt like that they were having a lot of turnover and it was just costing them more money. And they are a group that had a large census, wonderful reputation in their area for great patient care, great employer, but they were still having a lot of staffing issues with the turnover. So they were set up in a standard way that we're all used to. Larger client, we want to have our own triage team take the calls for all of our locations, and then we'll dispatch the nurses in the area to make visits. Not a new experience. I'm sure some of you may relate to that is what you're doing today. And it's a way that's always been done, right? If it's not broken, don't fix it. But they're still having the same problems and not getting the results they were looking for. And so they wanted to just try something different, do something just a little bit different. So they decided to implement some technology solutions that we provide so they could capture in real time what was happening after hours and provide a better staff, patient, caregiver experience, taking maybe some of the emotion out of it, gather some of the data to improve that experience. The end goal was to focus on really staff burnout and reducing burden. That was their goal when they started, but after they started using our software and then our people team, our nursing team as support, they adjusted a lot of internal processes for how they handled the calls after hours, and it was life-changing. They had business analytics and reporting that increased their visibility into what was happening. So they took that information and made changes during the daytime using that information, real data, to make changes. So just making some tweaks, some adjustments, getting their team on board, moving, allocating staff to support daytime after hours in a different way. They created capacity for their team. They put in the effort to change. They were able to reduce their staff turnover. This is the number for them, by 18%. So their staff was happy, their budget was happy, patient and caregivers had a different experience, better than the one they had before, and it had a significant impact on their overall business. Give it back to you, Laura.
So one thing that has been interesting as Laurie and I have sat back and looked at our evolving presence in our little corner of the healthcare space is that a lot more healthcare or hospice and home health in particular agencies are looking at technology as a potential solution. Even a few years ago, there was a lot of, hesitation, resistance to change. You know, workflows had been the same for 30 years. I don't really need to change. Things are working. There wasn't a lot of really interest in making changes, especially when it came to technology. I don't know if it was the pandemic, probably a lot to do with that, and just this rapid adoption of telehealth across the country, whether it's patients and providers. There's just been a rapid adoption. I think we have a slide that talks about that as well. But there has been this new interest in what telehealth has to offer and how these agencies can incorporate new technologies into their workflow, finding innovative ways to provide patient care. And I think that's really what's brought a lot of excitement and fun for Laurie and I as nurses to really help our customers find new innovative ways to support their patients. And it's been a lot of fun to be able to come up with these tools and solutions to provide that new experience, whether it's for the clinician or for the patient, and to find those benefits. We've seen a lot of increased call volume from the pandemic as a whole, just needing to feel that sense of security, connection, especially as people were isolated and separated from loved ones. There was an increase in call volume, and that then fell to the nurses to be able to support patients, and sometimes in ways that maybe they weren't prepared to do, more from an emotional standpoint, psychological standpoint, just being able to support and offer that type of reassurance over the phone to patients and their caregivers. And technology has really been that connection that's given them that way to connect to their patients and family members. And we've really started to see what those options might be as we move forward now with that increased adoption in telehealth.
We're going to go ahead and share a video from one of our clients.
Laurie, I think you do have a video that.
Yeah. right, Laura. I think that video ended, so we'll head back to you.
Okay. I don't know that we heard the audio on the video, but if we want to maybe try it again after, we can. um, yeah, but I can continue if that's okay. If you want to just continue on. So one thing we've learned is that providers can definitely make significant changes to both the patient experience as well as the clinician experience. So while adding more staff will definitely help improve the overall experience, it's not the only answer. Really having the right tools can provide significant benefit to the clinical workflow and subsequently improve the overall patient experience. A recent survey, it was in 2020, showed that nearly all provider executives wanted to do just that, especially for clinicians, that it's a top priority to focus on improving the clinician experience. And we all know that improving that clinician experience will then translate into an improved patient experience. Now, this is something that might not seem so obvious to some, but one way that providers can enter that world of telehealth and start to take advantage of some of the new technologies out there is simply by upgrading their telephony platforms, that telephone system that they have in the office. Moving from an old legacy application, an on-site ACD telephone system, to just a cloud-based system can really open new doors and new opportunities into telehealth, including having access to more sophisticated tools that can give you logic and routing controls over if the caller calls in and they need to speak with this type of a person, route them that way. Or if I recognize the phone number as belonging to this patient, then let's route it to the case manager. So things that might seem so small and simple can make a huge impact on the patient and caregiver experience. Another strategy that we've really just started to scratch the surface on with our clients is using these other built-in tools and ways to connect teams together, whether it's being able to see your other team members, who's available, who's not, are they with a patient, who's working, who can I reach out to if I need support? And not only that, where are they? If I need to go out and make a visit to a patient's home and I'm already out on the road and I realize I've forgotten something, is someone nearby me that I can just meet up with, grab some supplies so I don't have to go all the way back to the office? Some of these seemingly simple things that, you know, might still be solved with regular technology were made so much more efficient and streamlined by adding in some of these tools into our mobile application. We provided a way for secure messaging so that people could communicate and coordinate care after hours and even during hours for some of our clients when they wanted to take this and really expand it to their entire workforce. We saw some clients that started to adopt it with home health aides and with social workers and chaplains, just to feel that connection and be able to see that everybody was working together as a team and that they could really be focused on how they were delivering patient care. That was something that they really appreciated, and being able to feel that support of their team. The leaders also felt like they could be connected to that as well, because they could see this intelligence that came as a result of it and understand what their team was doing and how they were supporting their patients and caregivers. I'd say for me, this has probably been one of the most fun aspects of all of this journey that we've experienced, is seeing the data and the business intelligence that comes as a result. How can we learn and improve and provide better care? It's through data. It's through understanding what we've done and where can we make those small changes and measure and then see that change happen over time. So we provided this way to measure and benchmark the types of calls that were coming in, the general call reason codes, and categorize them, and then give them a tool and a way to benchmark themselves against our overall average across all of our like customers. So other hospice agencies, what were the main reasons why patients were calling in after hours, and how were we needing to support them? Were their needs more clinical in nature, more acute changes in patient symptoms, or was it more preventable type case management calls where the medications had run out or supplies were needing to be refilled? So those types of pieces of information we wanted to then give back to our customers so that they could then make informed decisions and improve their overall delivery and care during business hours, which would then lead to a better overall experience after hours. One of our particular clients actually took time to focus on one particular area. They wanted to look at medication calls. So they took that metric and they monitored it and they said, okay, how can we improve and decrease these medication calls after hours? And they took it upon themselves to coordinate with their case managers to do a quick check-in before business hours ended on the weekend, and to see, does the patient have everything they need for the weekend? Are we good to go? Medications are filled, supplies are all taken care of. And making that slight change, they cut their after hours medication related calls in half, saving them money not only on the after hours med refills, but it decreased the call volume and the work for their after hours team. More significantly though, the patients felt supported because they had those check-in calls and they felt like it was that personalized approach, and that vastly improved the overall care experience. Other customers were able to save in different ways using our solutions. We had one client report to us that they reduced their 911 calls by 88% by looking at this data and making changes to their workflow. That really does go a long way to help reduce that $32 billion spent annually in the US on unnecessary ER visits. The other big thing that we wanted to help our clients identify and really focus on is first call resolution. We wanted to give our clients a way for their patients to reach out and reach the case manager whenever they needed something and have that call go directly to the case manager so that they weren't having to play phone tag getting the call to the right person during business hours or even sometimes after hours. Another metric that we heard from one of our customers is that their supplementary phone costs, that's phone support cost, went down by 60%. Now the 60% reduction is unique to us in the telehealth space. We are a telehealth company in the business of taking less calls, not more, meaning we want to see our customers improve their overall patient care experience, which means less unplanned phone calls. The patients are feeling supported and cared for. They won't need to call in as much after hours. Those calls will be reserved for those unplanned, critical, life-changing type experiences where they need the nurse's support, and that would provide a way for those nurses to be available for those types of calls. With the right technology and processes in place, the transformation you can make for your clinical and non-clinical staff experience, not to mention the patient experience, are significant. Here's that slide that I mentioned. A study last year by McKinsey & Company noted that telehealth adoption has exploded as a result of the pandemic, with usage up 38-fold. And McKinsey does foresee that there's about $250 billion in healthcare moving to virtual healthcare. Telehealth will move beyond basic care to integrated chronic disease management in particular is where they're really seeing that. Home health and hospice does enjoy bipartisan confidence from policymakers as an effective setting to reduce healthcare costs system-wide. CMS, for example, did credit home health and hospice with $3.5 billion in savings when patients are placed in the home health and hospice setting versus a skilled nursing facility or other post-acute options. In 2022, we do hope and expect to see more creative policy making as we've seen over the past couple of years. Ideally, we'll move beyond the Build Back Better legislation, that $1.9 trillion bill that's being pushed through. It did include $150 billion in benefits for home health and hospice, but there was other, it was bogged down with other social spending type items that then prevented it from really moving forward. We do really look for an uptick in conversations about reimbursement for telehealth and RPM's health technologies in this setting. So really, we're continuing to blend this in-person and virtual care experience with exciting new technologies. We already offer both clinical and non-clinical telephone backup support. Remote patient monitoring is a recent addition. It includes device kits. We're also working on virtual office visits and creating support for scheduled patient notifications like, hey, it's time to take your blood pressure, and maybe more unscheduled interactions like your blood oxygen levels are lower than normal. Maybe we should contact a nurse.
Thanks, Laura, for all of that information. I think that we missed the video audio, which really summarizes what we're going to talk about on this last slide. But really, I think we'll go ahead and talk about this, and I'm going to attempt the video again just so we can hear from the horse's mouth, per se, of how this can impact your overall business. So with the right technology, a desire to innovate, you can support patients and staff improving the experience for everybody. Everybody that's touched by a patient or touched in your healthcare space can have some sort of impact, affect them. So help your patients get the right care they need when they need it, that first call resolution we talked about. Gain insights into your organization. You can optimize workflow, you can optimize staffing, streamline processes, which really overall strengthens your bottom line. And it will have a direct impact on quality. If you can do just a percentage of increase towards moving outside of, those pandemic glasses and really being more strategic in your business, you will have a direct impact on your quality and your outcomes. Even though the Build Back Better bill is a little politicized, I love the coined phrase of Build Back Better. When we are given an opportunity to take what we've learned from hard things, we get to then build back better when we try and do something just a little bit better in the space that we've been in for a while. So let me pause for just a moment, and we'll just go back to that video. I love to just end with that, and then we can dive into our Q&A session. So bear with me for a minute while I scooch back to attempt this again.
But having the nursing background and having a nurse the first time you call answer the phone to help with symptoms immediately has made a significant impact on the care that we're.
Sounds like it might be quiet, so that might not be working. Let's just head to the Q&A portion of our presentation today so we make sure that your time is valued and where we're at. And we'll turn that back to, actually, Jim, if you want to go ahead and start that, we'll just go ahead and head to our Q&A.
Excellent. Well, thank you both for your insights today. Our first question relates to telehealth. And if you could just speak to what are some of the most recent trends you're seeing in telehealth right now?
I'll go ahead and start this, Laura, and then you can add in. I think some of the biggest questions that keep coming back to us over and over are how can we connect patients in telehealth with video and being proactive instead of reactive. So how can we be proactive in connecting with our patients and knowing the demographic, the audience we're dealing with? How can it be turnkey and easy to use? So we talk about solutions in RPM. Those are some of the things you're going to look for. How can I connect with my patients? How can it be turnkey because we're dealing with a geriatric or sick population, so that the solution I do choose can be universal to all of the patients that I see. On top of that, we mentioned kind of some of the reimbursements. There's not a lot of reimbursement in hospice or home health right now for a lot of RPM solutions, but we are finding that using the technology within RPM solutions, even though maybe you don't get the reimbursement, does have its own ROI because you are connecting with patients and caregivers in a different way. You're being proactive instead of reactive in your care.
One thing I might mention too with telehealth, it's been interesting talking with individuals now that it's become more common, that telehealth often gets lumped in with being on video, and that's not necessarily, that's not all that telehealth is. Telehealth is being able to provide care for a patient through technology. So one thing I have heard a lot recently is now that we have this logic of being able to route a call, can we route things like text messages? Is there a way for patients and caregivers to be able to connect to their care team through text message without having to disclose personal phone numbers in order to do so? And that is something that is becoming more and more common, just providing more channels, more ways to connect the patients to the caregivers that they have within the agencies.
Thank you. And, so I would like to hear your thoughts on what are some of the best ways to help providers keep their staff and reduce attrition.
That is a great question, and I wish we had the magic pill to say this is exactly how you do it. But what we're finding as we connect with our clients who are coming to us for help, or we are supporting, that they're trying to do kind of three different things. One is obviously create capacity. Like you're running a business, you understand that part of your business plan includes key people, and in home health and hospice, those RNs are your key people, and I need to create capacity because there's a shortage of them. So how can I do things just a little bit different so that the skill and talent that I have, I can ask more from them. So trying to get more with what you already have, which then at the same time, you have to figure out, how do I protect those individuals as well? So how can I do things smarter? When we talk about how can I prevent burnout, how can I really have impact on my staff, let's just do things a smarter, more efficient way. We are currently working with a client of ours where they are switching their after hour support a little bit, and I'll just give you an example of how they do things. So receiving a phone call after hours, we'll just take that simple experience you can all relate to. In that one phone call connection, they have to log into 6 different systems to care for that phone call. So whether it's a mobile application to receive something from the answering service, then an on-call schedule, then their EMR to document, then, all these different touch points. I know you can understand the different touch points of just one phone call. I have to log into 6 systems. Well, all of those logging into systems takes time. It adds up. Where we're able to provide efficiency for them is one system to log in to handle that phone call. They can connect to the patient and caregiver immediately. They can connect to their EMR because of interface solutions. I can see patient info, medications, demographics, all of the things I need to care for this phone call. And then I can connect with my on-call staff all from the same spot. So that saves time, and time is precious, so that I can either increase capacity to that individual, or I can prevent feeling overwhelmed and overworked. And then the protection of that staff member, of not feeling like you're alone. I think when we are in a technology driven world like now, where everybody now is working from home and isolated, you can feel really alone, and that is a different problem in the same space, right? So how do we connect together? So how can we use that technology to keep my team connected so they feel like they're building something together, working hard together, feeling supported, especially at 2 a.m. when you're the only one on. If you have a whole team of individuals to support you, you don't feel alone, and you feel like you have that energy and the drive to go ahead and keep going. I don't know, Laura, if you want to add anything else to that.
No, I think you summarized it really well.
We have one more question, and what are the biggest friction points for organizations to adopt telehealth? Patient adoption, end user ease of use. Providers wanted someone to do the work for them. So if it's not turnkey, they are not as interested due to the amount of effort it might be to put in a new solution, or so it seems. So what would you say those big friction points are?
I can take that, Laurie, or at least the first pass. One of the biggest friction points we see is as technology has, really grown, especially in healthcare with telehealth adoption. It's I don't want to load one more app onto my phone, and now I have to manage 5 apps on my shift. Before it was I had no apps to manage and I was doing everything manually and having to coordinate on paper and call someone or text someone. It was done through these disparate but familiar avenues of communication. Now it's all within one device, but you're switching from app to app to app, and sometimes that can just be frustrating. So I know that there is a lot of talk just in the EMR space in particular about how to better collaborate and integrate with tools that can support the overall clinician workflow that then translates into the patient care experience. So being able to share data and be able to potentially embed technologies within existing technologies or share intelligence to be able to use one app to do multiple things. That's some of the new topic that we're seeing because there's all these really awesome technologies and telehealth solutions out there now, and people are less willing to add one more app to their phones or their tablets. But I'd say from a user provider perspective, ease of use is definitely a big factor. And one thing we've also seen as a source of friction is, interestingly enough, support and, I don't know the best word, reassurance potentially from administration, and feeling like the end users, the nurses in the field that are out there on call using the app, that they feel supported by the administration and that they're not being forced to use a technology that doesn't make any sense to them, feeling like they have buy-in and understand why they're using it, being part of the decision-making process even, so that they understand that the value that this tool is going to bring, aside from the fact that it's just being easy to use. Why am I using this? I think those are some of the bigger questions that we definitely see on a recurring basis. I don't know, Laurie, if you have any other thoughts or comments.
No, I think you nailed it for sure. I think we all feel that way. One more app, right?
Mm-hmm.
To distract us.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, we are at the end of our presentation. Thank you again so much, Laura and Lori, for being here. It was a great discussion, and I'd like to thank all of our listeners who tuned in this afternoon. I'll just quick reminder that slides and a recording will be distributed after the program, and I hope you all take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.